Hello, knowledge seekers. In this episode of 20-Minute Books, we explore The Myth of Sanity by Martha Stout, a compelling analysis into the ordinary nature of dissociative experiences in everyday life. This book challenges the notion that dissociation is reserved only for the extreme cases typically labeled as crazy. Instead, Stout reveals how common it is to endure moments where we lose track of time, forget our surroundings, or even experience out-of-body phenomena, suggesting that these instances are influenced by both minor and significant traumas throughout our lives. Martha Stout, a clinical psychologist with an impressive background, including positions at Harvard Medical School and Wellesley College, deftly combines clinical expertise with accessible writing to guide readers through the mechanisms of dissociation. Her insights not only illuminate the causes, but also offer strategies for overcoming these moments to embrace a more present and engaged life. This book is an essential read for fans of psychology, eager to understand the nuances of the human mind, individuals experiencing dissociative states, and trauma survivors looking for explanations and tools for recovery. Join us as we delve into the transformative insights of The Myth of Sanity and learn how to navigate the complexities of our psychological landscapes. The Myth of Sanity, Divided Consciousness, and the Promise of Awareness. Introduction. Understanding the escape artist within, dealing with dissociation. Ever found yourself zoning out while driving back from work, only to realize you don't remember parts of the journey? Or perhaps you've lost yourself in a movie, completely absorbed to the extent you felt part of the scene? These moments are more than just daydreaming. They are instances of dissociation, a common psychological phenomenon where the mind takes a little break from reality. Dissociation can be thought of as the mind's escape mechanism. It's what happens when the brain decides to momentarily check out as a coping strategy, often triggered by stressful or overwhelming situations. While this might sound harmless, even beneficial, as a temporary relief, it's a double-edged sword. Our psyche may begin relying on this escape hatch more than we realize, leading to us missing out on truly confronting and processing our emotions. Why does dissociation happen anyway? To understand this, we must delve into the realms of human psychology and the brain's incredible yet sometimes flawed ways of protecting itself. Please note, the following discussion touches upon sensitive topics including child abuse, trauma, and emotional distress. In this chapter, we'll explore the challenges of articulating traumatic experiences verbally, how dissociation might explain certain out-of-body experiences, and the severe impact of extreme despair, to the point where one might feel lifeless from hopelessness. Join us as we unpack these complex psychological behaviors, aiming to better understand how our minds react under pressure. Part 1. The Hidden Cost of Psychological Shielding, Exploring Dissociation's Edges. Imagine a serene evening drive home after a rigorous session at the gym. The light is green, and just as you're about to cross an intersection, you spot a vehicle barreling through a red light heading straight for your car. In that split second, as the realization dawns, something unusual happens. You suddenly feel as if you're no longer in your body. You're an onlooker, observing the impending crash, as if you were a bystander rather than the driver. This out-of-body sensation is an example of dissociation, a common defense mechanism triggered during intense stress or trauma. Here's the critical insight. While dissociation can be a lifesaver in crisis moments, it's a mechanism with significant repercussions. Dissociation serves an essential purpose by helping us detach from the emotional impact of traumatic events, allowing us to remain composed rather than succumbing to panic. However, its aftermath isn't always benign. After dissociating during a traumatic event, you might find seemingly normal situations triggering unexpected and intense reactions because your brain has linked these innocuous moments to the trauma. Let's consider a fictional scenario with Beverly, who is innocently reading a newspaper while waiting at a train station. She's so absorbed in her reading that she's startled by the loud signal of an arriving train, causing her heart to race and an overwhelming urge to flee. Without realizing Beverly's sensory experience, the loud noise combined with the scent of chlorine from a nearby pool transports her back to a tragic memory from her childhood when she witnessed her sister being hit by a car. This momentary lapse into a dissociative state might leave Beverly feeling exhausted, paranoid, or fearful without understanding why. It's a mild example of how our minds might react to trauma cues long after the event itself has passed. The nuances of dissociation, from mild absenteeism from the moment to profound disconnections from reality, underscore its complexity as a survival tool. We'll delve deeper into the intense end of the dissociative spectrum in the following sections. Part 2. When trauma takes hold, the impact on memory and dissociation. Trauma doesn't merely leave emotional wounds, it fundamentally alters the brain, particularly affecting the hormone levels and crucial regions involved in memory processing. To understand the mechanism, it's essential to grasp how memories are typically formed. Normally, sensory information is first relayed to the amygdala, the brain's hub for emotional processing. Once the amygdala evaluates this data based on its emotional content, it forwards these assessments to the hippocampus. There, the information is organized by emotional weight and integrated with existing memories. However, this process becomes disrupted under severe emotional stress or trauma. The crux of the issue is this. Trauma interferes with the brain's ability to store memories, leading to dissociative reactions. When the amygdala perceives an event as overwhelmingly significant, the hippocampus struggles to properly sort and integrate this data with other memories. Consequently, traumatic memories often manifest as disjointed sensory flashes or physical sensations rather than coherent narratives. Another key factor is that these amygdala-driven memories frequently bypass the brain's language processing centers. This disconnection means that it becomes challenging, if not impossible, to articulate these memories through language. These memories also tend to be more readily accessible than those moderated by the hippocampus, making them persistent and invasive. To see the real-life implications of these effects, consider the story of a patient named Julia, a Stanford graduate and a producer of award-winning documentaries. Despite her professional accomplishments, Julia faced an unnerving personal challenge. She could not recall any of her childhood memories. The only clear memory from her childhood was a traumatic event involving the euthanasia of her pet dog when she was 12. Julia's memory gap stemmed from a harrowing childhood, filled with physical and sexual abuse by her parents. During these abusive episodes, young Julia learned to dissociate, to mentally escape from her reality. This dissociative state disrupted the normal memory recording and sorting process in her brain, leading her to be psychologically absent for vast portions of her childhood. Julia's story is not just a personal tragedy, but a profound illustration of how trauma and dissociation can leave gaping holes in one's personal history. As we explore further, we'll uncover more about the mechanisms of dissociation and its pervasive impact. Part 3. Navigating through time and self, the puzzle of dissociative episodes. Consider Julia, who suffers from a dissociative disorder manifesting in various complex ways. Among these, her episodes of fugue, or psychological flights, are particularly striking. During such an episode, Julia's mind might engage in everyday activities like waking up, going to work, or engaging in conversations, as if on autopilot, while the parts of her brain responsible for processing emotions and forming memories lag behind. This leads to moments where Julia feels like she has lost time. For instance, she once woke up believing it was Tuesday, only to discover from a coworker that it was, in fact, Friday, with no recollection of the intervening days, even though others hadn't noticed anything amiss. Here lies a critical observation. Dissociative states can lead to significant time loss or even out-of-body experiences. Julia's prolonged fugue states are typically triggered by everyday cues that her brain unconsciously links to past trauma. However, not all dissociative experiences involve such extensive disconnection. More commonly, people experience what's termed as demi-fugue, which involves a fleeting sense of detachment from reality rather than a complete disconnect. Consider Lila, another patient, who refers to her experiences of demi-fugue as her flyaway self. A confrontation at a store where a cashier's disdainful look reminded her of her stepfather's expressions catapulted her into this flyaway self. During such moments, Leela described the world as appearing diminished and distant, akin to viewing through the narrow lens of a telescope. Demi-fugue also encapsulates other types of out-of-body experiences. Picture a college sophomore traveling home for Thanksgiving. Despite a seemingly normal flight, she arrives feeling unusually tired and heavy, as if weighed down. Throughout the weekend, she feels strangely absent, likely dissociating due to unresolved childhood trauma linked to her family home. These stories underline a common pattern. Many who experience dissociative states have a history of childhood trauma. As we delve deeper into this connection, we aim to uncover why such early hardships frequently pave the way for dissociative disorders later in life. Part 4. The heightened vulnerability of children to trauma. Child abuse remains a stark reality across the globe. In the United States alone, nearly 5% of all children are reported as victims of abuse each year. Furthermore, conservative figures suggest that up to 38% of American girls and 16% of boys face sexual abuse before reaching adulthood. Beyond direct abuse, many children are exposed to indirect forms of violence, from witnessing muggings and shootings, particularly in urban settings, to living through large-scale disasters, which impacted 3 billion people from 1967 to 1991 alone. While the majority of children may not directly encounter abuse or disasters, it's essential to recognize their heightened sensitivity to traumatic events. Here's a significant point. Children are much more vulnerable to trauma than adults. Trauma fundamentally disturbs our perceived sense of safety and order, leaving us feeling powerless. Children, with their limited life experience and still developing sense of the world, are especially susceptible to such disruptions. Consider the hypothetical scenario of a 9-year-old boy named Matthew. His parents don't engage in physical altercations, but are prone to serious verbal disputes. One day, Matthew encounters his mother destructively unleashing her anger on their family's china, hurling plates against the wall while cursing at the absence of his father. Witnessing this, Matthew retreats into a numb, disassociated state, barely recalling the event the following day. Fast forward to his adult years. Matthew finds himself unintentionally zoning out during conversations that remotely remind him of his parents' arguments. This instinctive disassociation is a direct result of the trauma imprinted in his childhood, illustrating how even non-physical forms of conflict can profoundly impact a child's psychological development. In severe cases, such persistent childhood trauma can lead to dissociative identity disorder, previously known as multiple personality disorder. This complex condition and its connections will be explored in further detail as we continue. Part 5. The origins of dissociative identity disorder in childhood trauma. Dissociative identity disorder, DID, although complex and not fully understood, is predominantly linked to prolonged, severe abuse experienced during childhood. Seen as a survival strategy, DID represents an extreme form of dissociation where the mind creates multiple identities or alters, each with distinct memories and personalities. The concept is rooted in the body's profound response to untenable stress. Research by psychologist C.P. Richter in 1957 showed that when mice were placed in inescapable stressful situations, many succumbed to heart failure, overwhelmed by the hopelessness. Humans, however, have evolved complex psychological mechanisms to endure such extremes. DID is one such mechanism. allowing a person to fracture their identity to manage the unbearable. Here's the main takeaway. Dissociative identity disorder often develops as a survival technique in abused children. For children trapped in abusive environments, dissociation offers a kind of mental respite. Each alter manages a portion of the trauma, making the overall situation more bearable. While this can function as an effective coping mechanism during childhood, it becomes problematic as the individual grows older and moves out of the abusive context. Adults with DID might find themselves unpredictably lapsing into different alters, leading to potentially inappropriate or confusing behaviors. One profound instance of DID was observed in a patient named Garrett, who suffered continuous abuse at the hands of his uncle during childhood. This trauma was compounded when he witnessed his uncle fatally beating his younger brother, Lef. To cope, Garrett's psyche fragmented into multiple identities: James, a solitary young boy; Gordon, a brash protector; and the most tormented alter, Abe, who blamed Garrett for Lef's death and harbored suicidal tendencies. Garrett's case illustrates the severe complexity of DID, where the alters served distinct roles in handling the trauma. While not all DID manifests through such dramatic personality shifts, often the transitions between alters are more subtle. The underlying mechanism of coping through dissociation remains consistent. As we explore further, the nuances of these transitions and their impact on daily life will become clearer, revealing the delicate balance those with DID must navigate. Part 6. Navigating the unpredictable waters of dissociative identity disorder. Think about how well you know the people closest to you, your family, friends, or spouse. You might confidently say you can predict their behaviors and responses. However, our perceptions of others are often tinted by our expectations and desires, not just objective observations, which can sometimes blind us to deeper, underlying issues they might be facing. For example, consider how you might rationalize a friend's irritable mood one evening as stress from work rather than a facet of their personality. This tendency to attribute such behaviors to external factors helps maintain a consistent image of them in our minds. But what if the reality was more complicated? What if these mood fluctuations were not just situational but indicative of something like dissociative identity disorder, DID? Here's a vital point to grasp. Dissociative identity disorder can lead to significant, unexpected changes in behavior. In America, less than 1% of the population is estimated to have DID in the form where distinct personalities or alters emerge. More frequently, DID manifests as sudden, unexplained shifts in behavior that diverge sharply from a person's usual self. Consider Nathan, a case study who is typically outgoing and affable. His wife of 15 years regards him as a loving father and spouse. Yet Nathan sometimes exhibits baffling behavior, disappearing for hours or acting out in unwarranted jealousy. One moment he is the loving Nathan his wife knows, and the next he plunges into irrational, jealous interrogations about her past. For his wife, these unpredictable behavioral shifts make her feel disconnected and unimportant, as if she's constantly treading lightly to avoid triggering Nathan's most distressing altercations. This example underscores a common struggle for those close to individuals with DID. They often find themselves managing around these unpredictable switches that can leave them feeling isolated and fearful within the relationship. Understanding DID and its impact not only on those diagnosed, but also on their loved ones is crucial for fostering empathy and providing appropriate support. As we explore further, we aim to illuminate the challenges and paths to managing this complex disorder effectively. Part 7. Breaking free from dissociative states by confronting the past. Dissociative states, ranging from simple daydreaming to adopting entirely different personas, are more common than one might think. How, then, can individuals break free from these states and regain control over their consciousness? Insight from the author's work with patients like Garrett and Julia brings hope and direction. Their journeys through facing their difficult pasts show the power of confronting trauma head-on. Here's the core message. Overcoming dissociative states often requires tackling past traumas directly and accepting responsibility for healing. Take Garrett, for example. His alter, Abe, tormented by guilt and false memories of causing his brother's death, dominated his mental landscape. Through sessions involving hypnosis, however, Abe was repeatedly exposed to the reality of the events until he accepted the truth that he wasn't to blame. This realization ultimately led to Abe's disappearance from Garrett's mind. Similarly, Julia, who had almost no memory of her abusive childhood, gradually revisited her painful memories under guided hypnosis. She physically revisited places tethered to her trauma, like her old neighborhood and a significant beach. This brave confrontation with her past allowed her to start healing. So, if you suspect someone has dissociative tendencies, there are ways to help. Ensure safety first. If the person might become violent, distance is crucial. However, if there's no immediate threat, encourage their true self to re-emerge by engaging them with their preferred identity. You can facilitate their journey towards recognizing their condition by suggesting therapy, provided they're open to acknowledging their issue. For those who might be experiencing dissociative disorders themselves, initiating recovery can take several forms. Maintaining a dream journal, practicing mindfulness or meditation can provide insights into your subconscious. Returning to places linked with your traumas might be daunting, but can confront and diminish the power of those memories. Most critically, shifting the perception from seeing oneself as a victim to recognizing oneself as a survivor can dramatically alter the internal narrative, reducing the control of past abusers and empowering oneself toward recovery. These strategies highlight that while the path to overcoming dissociative states isn't simple, it's laden with potential for personal restoration and peace. Final summary. Dissociation serves as a critical psychological defense mechanism, originally designed to shield us from emotionally overwhelming situations. This process, while normal and often necessary, can be finely honed during childhood, sometimes to a detrimental extent. As adults, this heightened ability to dissociate can lead us to regularly detach from our emotions, thereby preventing full engagement with the present. The encouraging takeaway, however, is that even profound dissociative disorders can be addressed effectively. By courageously confronting our traumatic experiences and assuming responsibility for our emotional well-being, we enable ourselves to lead richer, more present lives. Through understanding and addressing our dissociative experiences, we can transition from mere survival to actively thriving in our day-to-day lives. Thank you for joining me today on this journey of learning and discovery as we explored the insights of another thought-provoking book in our growing library of knowledge. If you've enjoyed our time together, please take a moment to follow our podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and share 20-minute books with other knowledge seekers. Your support truly means a lot. Don't forget to join me again in the next episode, where we will delve into another enriching book. Until then, happy reading and happy listening.